reading out those front pages there, of course, none of them have the huge overnight news that it seems that a deal has now been signed between Israel and Hamas, a peace deal, which looks set to see imminently the release of the hostages, but also some Israeli troop withdrawals, aid going into Gaza from the United Nations and aid organisations. The words from Donald Trump on his social media Truth Social post, he said, "Blessed are the peacemakers. This is a great day for the Arab and Muslim world, Israel, all surrounding nations, and the United States of America. And we thank the mediators from Qatar, Egypt and Turkey who work with us to make this historic and unprecedented event happen." I mean, you always have to be so cautious when you talk about the Middle East because everything can go wrong and so many times hopes have been raised. But this does feel as though, at this moment, the most significant moment in the Middle East for peace, for decades, certainly since the early 90s.
Yeah, well, there's been many false dawns, hasn't there? But it does look hugely positive, and we all keep our fingers crossed because the horrors that have unfolded day after day in that part of the world have been devastating. We've all wanted to see the hostages released from day one. I've wanted to see a ceasefire for 2 years. It does look like President Trump's diplomatic efforts are about to bring about that much-needed peace. I think there is a role that the Labour government has played in this as well. Remember, Labour has done what it can diplomatically. It has recognised Palestinian statehood. That's only because we have a Labour government and Labour MPs. And it has also put pressure on Israel in the past. It suspended things like arms sales. But, look, let's hope this is the final moment now where we do get peace and we get those hostages released and we get the surge of humanitarian aid into that part of the world as well.
But look, I mean, the deal has been struck and we've got to wait and see the details because obviously there's some conflicting narratives.
Well, yeah,
here.
shall I just... Well, we were talking about this before, weren't we, Crosby? So, you know, when you look... So both sides are claiming success, as they would, and if there is peace and an end to dying, then it is a success for both. But Benjamin Netanyahu says, this is a diplomatic success, a national and moral victory for the state of Israel. We will not rest until all our hostages return and all our goals achieved. Meanwhile, Hamas says... this is great for us, reaching an agreement stipulating an end to the war on Gaza, the occupation's withdrawal from it, and a prisoner exchange. So for the hostages to be released, they will get their prisoners back. And they are saying that there will be a withdrawal. Now, where that line is drawn...
Exactly right.
...for the troops to withdraw from will become critical, and you can see...
That's the sticking point. Because Netanyahu, I don't think, will want to leave Gaza entirely. And at the same time, Hamas, that's exactly what they want. They want the Israeli troops out. So how that is resolved is a critical question.
But the deal depends upon Hamas being out as well and control over Gaza and the West Bank being handed over to a transitional authority now to be chaired by Donald Trump.
And your old...
well, Tony Blair's is in there as well.
Boss, yeah.
But, I mean, there is a whole kind of process which unfolds over a long period of time. And I guess at the moment, in the Middle East, you always want to say we're on the path to peace, but nobody quite wants to define the end point because it's very hard to get agreement on that.
They can't both...
Movement forward is a huge...
That's right, but they can't both claim victory in the way that they're doing.
Yeah, but of course they're going to claim victory.
Yeah, I know that, but that's where the problem is. Because there's going to have to be compromise.
Of course.
And all the deals that have unravelled precisely because of this. Because neither side...
But it is clearly neither a victory for Israel or a victory for Hamas.
Yeah, but that's not what they're saying.
Hamas has to be out, and Israel is not getting what it wanted, which is control of Gaza and the West Bank. So both of them are actually... I mean, Hamas and Israel are both in a very weak position, and it's really a victory for the Americans and the Arab League and Europe.
But they have to stick to the deal. That's all the other deals we've had, and we've had other false dawns, have unravelled because people weren't prepared to stick to what was agreed.
But it surely has to be a good thing that both sides are putting out welcoming words. That suggests that both sides do, at the moment, want this deal to stick. And my word, the world wants this deal to stick because we want a ceasefire and an end to the killing.
Both sides.
Absolutely, but if they're claiming publicly We've seen this before in lots of negotiations. That might be to sell it to the people.
Yeah.
And if you can claim victory, whatever the detail is, then pride is hell, and that bodes well, I would have thought.
Look, I think it's very positive. I'm not somebody who's going to say this is a bad thing. Obviously, it's a very good thing. How can you deny that? The problem going forward is you've got to bring people with you. And we've seen in the past, it just takes one or two people on the extremes and the whole thing can come crashing down. I mean, I'm old enough to remember Rabin. He was a great peacemaker. And then he was assassinated.
Yeah.
And that's often the story in this
Which is
part
horrible.
of the world.
We saw in that little piece of footage, didn't we, Donald Trump on the phone talking to families of the hostages. What we know is that there are 48 that haven't been released. We understand only 20 are alive, confirmed as alive. The others we don't know because the guards, the people that keep them captive, have also been killed. So already, I mean, my goodness, for the families, they just want their people, but they want to even know who's alive. They don't even know that family's alive. So that is going to be huge, and that relief hopefully will be something that brings positivity to the deal. Do you think?
I think there'll be huge. I think there'll be huge relief. I think there's. I think that the release of those hostages is a really, really significant moment. But obviously, as you say, there are still remains, sadly, of people who are yet to be found. On the other side of the equation, there's a number of Palestinian prisoners who are going to be released, and of course, there's been such a huge loss of life in the Gaza area that there's going to be a period of mourning and grief now. So this is still very, very delicate, and we all pray it succeeds.
And to bring this back to Britain, Gwazi, because this is happening 2 years on from the terrible events of October the 7th and the Hamas attacks on Israel, but it's also 1 week on from the terrible terrorist incident at the Manchester synagogue. There's to be a moment of reflection planned today, remembering again Adrian Dolby and Melvin Kravitz, who lost their lives in that terrorist attack. I mean, we have had a period of such terrible division and rising anti-Semitism, but more widely hate in our country, which goes back to these events in the Middle East.
Yeah, sure.
Is it possible that we can start to heal some of those wounds?
Well, look, I mean, I think we're all praying that, you know, things do settle down and that peace in the region can be reflected in a more stable and peaceful environment here in the UK. But, you know, the fact is, Ed, we've been having these attacks for years in drips and drabs.
Sure.
I mean, I remember David Amess, who was a colleague, Sir David Amess, an MP, who was killed 4 years ago now. We're nearly at that anniversary. I think it was 4 years ago next week. And all of this violence obviously is flowing from what's going on in the Middle East. And hopefully, if we can get peace in the Middle East, that could be reflected here. But let's see.
That attack in Manchester, the Heaton Park synagogue. I actually grew up not far away from that part of Manchester. I've walked past that synagogue many times. I've actually got friends who go to that synagogue. And I was talking to a friend of mine who said he didn't know if his parents were safe until he'd seen them coming out of the doors on the news. Had to wait. He was watching the news, and the devastation in Manchester is so raw. And I think everybody is praying that both we have peace in the Middle East, but this sort of coarsening of the debate around these issues in the UK and every country, frankly, the division that we've seen around these issues, that somehow we've got to bring people back together, and we've got to move on from what has been such an awful period in our history when there has been such division, such hatred.
You felt very personally. I mean, you know, that was at the heart of your election campaign. And
I mean, that's just what look on my part. I mean, I understand why people feel strongly about it.
But you were at the sharp end of the reality of division in the world, leading to intense division here in the UK.
And you know, and last week when we saw the attacks, I immediately reached out to the rabbi in Leicester, where I was the MP, because I know that his community were feeling very anxious about what happened that day, understandably.
But the spillover effect.
And he hopes that communities come together again.
But
we've all got to work on that.
But Jonathan, if it hadn't been for the Hamas attack on the 7th of October, you probably would still be a Labour MP.
Yeah, but I'm not. Sure.
Not that you look back.
We're not saying about you. We're just saying that
generally
events in the world can lead to divisions in communities, people like you politically. the terrible attack in Manchester. I mean, these global events come back to
on the doorstep.
Very real trauma here in the UK.
Yeah, sure, but I'm not going to blame people for feeling strongly about it.
No.
Although the irony is, it's actually a Labour government and Labour MPs that delivered things like Palestinian statehood, not independent MPs who are pretty, have got no influence over anything. But that's, people. I don't blame people for having strong views about these issues. Of course, people should have strong views.
I mean, one of the things that was said, when Manchester happened and the horror unfolded, is that it was a conflict on foreign soil, conflict in the Middle East spilling onto our streets.
Yeah.
I guess all we can do is hope that if there is some sort of peace or at least an end to fighting in the Middle East, we can see some of the peace spilling back into that crisis.
But we've been living in this shadow for I mean, when was the London attack? Was that 2005? Yeah. For 20 years, we've been living under this shadow.
I'm not totally sure. The decisions on the Nobel Peace Prize will be announced. I think it actually happens tomorrow. Donald Trump is, clearly, when he says "blessed are the peacemakers," we know who he's talking about. Whether he's actually going to win the Nobel Peace Prize for this year, I think it's probably a little bit too early. But I would be very surprised if Donald Trump is going to be giving a huge amount of credit to Keir Starmer and the Labour government for Palestinian recognition. I'm not sure that's going to be part of it.
I don't know how you crowbarred that in.
That is the Labour government did what it can diplomatically as well, and the Labour government, working with France and Canada and other countries, thought that was an important move and also an important contribution.
And he does give credit to Qatar, Egypt and Turkey, doesn't he? So that's obviously what he sees as crucial. Shall we come back to the UK and the big... there's several big stories on the front of the newspapers. The one that we'll come to first is this idea of job advisors in surgery. So attempting to get people off benefits, back into work for various reasons. There could be disability, it could be mental health. And one of the ways it's proposed to tackle it with a big investment of cash is you have a job advisor at the surgery. Now, how do you think that will be interpreted by those going to their doctor? And what do you think the thinking is, Jonathan?
So this is one of the ideas that I was putting forward when I was the Shadow Welfare Secretary a couple of years ago. Because there have actually been examples of putting these advisors, particularly in mental health services and addiction services, where people have been given the support to find a job. And then often what happens is these advisors will, keep checking in on you when you move into a job. And there has been evidence that if you've got a depression or a stress or an addiction problem, if you've been able to find a suitable job and the routine of a job, it has helped you manage your condition. So I actually think it's...
Our GP says this is the benefit police being put into surgery.
That's
and the GP we were talking to in the news said she was worried that would stop people coming into the GP surgery at all.
Well, I don't think she does need to be worried, because I think in the modern general practice now, you have a range of different professionals to help you with your different conditions. And, so sometimes there'll be, nurses, there'll be physiotherapy, there'll be pharmacists. And actually, I think now bringing these services together with health services, when we know so many people are out of work for reasons of ill health, making sure you get that specialist support is really sensible.
Let's face it. The government tried to bring in the welfare bill earlier in the summer to cut the expenditure. That failed. They didn't manage to do that. So this is another way in which you're trying to essentially get people off the benefit system and back into work.
Yeah.
So it's another way. Well, it'll cost more money because you've got to put money up front to pay for the people, who are going to be, in the GP surgeries, coaxing people back to work. So in the short run, it's going to cost more money. But I can see in the longer term, if it works, they want to take more people off disability benefits and things like that and coax them back into work. And that's what this is about.
It is, but it does go on in mental health services.
But people might say, well, if there was better support for the mental health services anyway, and I could get access to that, I could get myself back to work, if there was better support, which is very hard for people with disabilities to get access to work for practical reasons, and that money being cut. So why not put the money into that? Why have somebody standing there when you go into your surgery, almost like judging whether you need it or not? I think that's what people are seeing.
Yeah. But in reality, that's not how it will work. Right. What that will be is... and this won't be somebody... Well, we'll see what the minister says when they come on later, but this won't be forced upon people, I suspect. It will be there to give people support and help to coach them into finding the right type of work. That's how it currently works
but
in mental health services.
It'll be judged on how many people actually find jobs and come off benefits.
And as it happens, it's quite an expensive way of doing it.
That's where.
But the interesting thing
it'll be judged.
How this is going to fit with what else the government's going to do, and there will be more to come on welfare reform. Sure. My instinct is we've always had this system in the past which was if you are actively looking for work, counted as unemployed, you have to take a job.
Yeah.
But if you've been classified as incapacitated with sickness or mental health issue or whatever, you don't have to actively look for work.
Yes, that's right.
Once you start saying we're going to put job advisors in the GP service, isn't what they're edging towards is saying for people with certain kinds of illness, you aren't going to be counted as incapacitated. You're going to be told you've got to look for work, and we put the job advisors in there. And if you don't look for work, even if you've got this particular health condition, then they'll say you're breaking the rules, you lose your benefit. Well, it feels to me that's where they're going.
Well, let's see.
Where they're going.
We'll see if that actually happens. That would be a change in what they call the rules around benefit and conditionality. But at the moment, a lot of the people who are out of work for reasons of sickness, particularly mental health conditions, do say in surveys if they were given the right level of support, right package of support, they would like to try work.
And you've seen this work already, have you, in sort of like small schemes?
Yeah, they do. This is work in mental health services and addiction services. I think
it's
a really good example in Nottingham, for example.
But I think you're absolutely right. I think what happened early in the summer when they couldn't reduce the welfare bill, they've suddenly thought, actually, let's try this other way. And I think you're quite right that in the end, there could be some conditionality on people who traditionally didn't have any.
I don't think there will be.
Well, let's see.
I mean, that would be a big move if there was. I think it would be about people volunteering for this. That's how it works in this. The scheme's called individual placement and support. I don't want to get really jargony, but that's what the scheme is called in mental health services.
I don't think we can have a news panel and not mention Kemi Badenoch's speech yesterday. She actually was judged by the newspapers to storm it. She announced a massive tax cut, which by 2030 will cost £20 billion a year without telling us how she's going to pay for it, while saying she was economic credibility. So, the stamp duty thing.
A lot of people will be very excited by the idea of this.
I mean, it was very much similar to... Starmer was under pressure going into the conference. He did enough, essentially, to stave off the rebellion. I think she did exactly the same thing. I think she's under huge pressure, obviously, from the party. And she did a good enough speech that roused people.
Seems better to me, in the sense that there's a big headline that people can get their head around.
It's very good. It was very good.
Cutting accent stamp duty will make a lot of people who want to get a house very excited, and a lot of people selling houses.
My broad point for both Starmer and Kemi is that everything's going to rise and fall on the local election. So no matter how well they do at conference,
but also
the proof of the pudding will be in the local election.
Kwasi, you have. I mean, as you know, you have to tell people when you say you're going to cut taxes.
Yeah, but not now.
Tell people where the money's coming from.
She doesn't have to tell them now,
right?
But obviously,
because she's not the chancellor now.
Exactly.
So, the Tories seem pleased. I mean, I suspect the only Tory who's not happy is Robert Jenrick. He's probably annoyed that she's done so well. But I still think they will ditch her before the next general election. I don't think.
What about Starmer? What about your man?
No, he'll be there.
What about your man?
He'll be there until the general election. Yes, but I still think they'll ditch her.
It's a brave set of predictions.
But the truth is, she's made these big tax cut promises. Well, why didn't you lot do it when you were in power for 14 years?
We tried some of that.
And as you say, where's the money coming from? Are they going to cut the NHS? Are they going to cut the education budget?
We tried some of that.
And how did that go, Kwasi?
We tried some of that. And she's going back to low taxes. And I think the Tories
And she'll have to cut public services to pay for it.
No, the Tories
she'll cut the NHS to pay for it.
A proposition where the tax burden comes down.
Cutting public services.
That's basically where we have to be.
Can't
keep increasing.
By cutting public services.
Well, we have the Work and Pensions Secretary of State, Pat McFadden, on at 8:30.
Yes.
So Jonathan and Kwasi will be able to come back and tell us whether he answered the questions right.
Interesting. Well, enjoy talking to them afterwards. And I'll ask you about celebrity traitors, which you too much love. It's just like politics. Don't know who to trust. You might get murdered or banished at any point.
I think Kwasi was wrong to turn it down when they offered him.
Oh.
It wasn't that one. It was another show.
What? It's all coming out now.
The Jungle.
The one where you have to eat spiders.
The Jungle one.
I'm a celebrity.
The Jungle. You'd be great on that.
That one.
I tell you, if you make up one question, you get surprising answers. There we are.
Don't you do? Don't you just?